This is the Outstanding Advisor Podcast, the show that features outstanding financial advisors. Advisors with an interesting story to tell. If you would like to be featured on the podcast, tell us why you are an outstanding financial advisor with an interesting story to tell. Send an email to oadvisorpodcast@gmail.com. That's oadvisorpodcast@gmail.com. And now, here's the host of the Outstanding Advisors Podcast, David Macchia.
Hello and welcome to the Outstanding Advisor Podcast. This is David Macchia, and thanks for joining for what is our very first Outstanding Advisor Podcast. And of course, this is the podcast that's devoted to featuring advisors who are outstanding and have an interesting story to tell. I want to introduce our first guest. Let me tell you about Michelle Gordon. I'm so thrilled to have her here today. She is the founder and CEO of Investably, a Maryland-based independent registered investment advisory firm that's focused on helping women, families, and entrepreneurs build wealth and transition into retirement so that they can enjoy their lives. She is a Stevie Award winner. That's a very prestigious award, with over 15 years of financial experience inside industry-leading asset management firms. And Michelle is a proud alum of New York University. Michelle shares my passion for helping women strengthen their retirement security. She's recently joined me to collaborate on our Women in Income program, and I'm very happy that she has, and I'm very proud of that program. So, Michelle, welcome to our first podcast.
Thank you, David. It's such an honor to be here with you.
I'm thrilled. And I'm going to ask you a first question, which sort of goes back to the very beginning, and I mean the real beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in a beautiful island in the Caribbean called Dominican Republic.
Fantastic. And at some point, obviously, you came to the United States. How old were you?
I was just a baby, just under 2 years old. So I've really just spent most of my time in New York, grew up in New York City. Such a wonderful place to be.
So coming to the United States as an infant, growing up in New York City, what was childhood like?
It was, I think like most New Yorkers would say, it's full of diversity, it's full of challenges, it's full of life. And for me in particular, watching my parents navigate, making it in the U.S., it was very eye-opening. We didn't have a lot, but there was a lot of heart. There was a lot of hard work. There was a lot of love. And for me, very much cemented what's important in life, So working hard and just with a mentality of resilience and tenacity, and that anyone can make it, especially in this country. And that's something I'm very proud of, and I don't take for granted.
Something we should never lose track of, that opportunity, and so many people who've seized upon it, like yourself. So tell me about your parents.
Yeah. My parents, they're just life. Hardest working people I've ever known. And the education was always a top priority in our house. And my mom was very strict. So you'd be surprised to know, for someone who grew up in New York, I was very sheltered. I think like most first generation kids wouldn't understand. And no, my parents, I'll tell you about my mom in particular, for example. She's someone who, we didn't come with a lot. She didn't even speak the language. And to make something of herself, she saw real estate as a way to do that. And I remember, I was really as young as 7. I remember her trying to teach herself the exam and memorizing and teaching herself in Spanish what the words meant and how it's applied, so she can pass this exam that's in English when she barely speaks the language. So she didn't.
So
she passed in her first shot.
She took the exam without having understanding of English per se.
She basically taught herself a way to get through it. and basically taught herself in Spanish what everything meant, and almost like sight word, like, okay, this word means this. And in her mind, she understood what it meant. But for me, very early on, it was a great lesson of there is no challenge big enough if you dedicate and you work hard and you think strategically and intelligently on how to make it happen. And so she's someone who has this eternal optimism. And then my dad is, he's one of these people that everyone loves. And I'll tell you a funny story. We were traveling somewhere. I think we were in Pennsylvania. Someone who hadn't seen him in 20 years spots him, and it's like they're best friends. And he just has that sort of um, that that social charisma, and they're both is just all heart. They're all heart, and the best way I can describe them is they would take food out of their mouth and give it to someone else, if there's someone who needs it more. And that very much just sort of um, represents, honestly, their whole life and their interaction with everyone. And that's something I take very much to heart. Something my grandmother always says, and it's my moral compass. It's and I'll say it in Spanish. I'll translate. It's "Haz bien, no mires a quién," means do good, don't look at who. And it's just sort of that ingrained in you that you're always in the position to do something more for people. So for me, I took that, and I mean, it's my moral compass, but I I got very much fascinated with um, wealth creation and investing and all of that actually because of my mom. Um, because she was a realtor, and I remember traveling with her in the back of the car and going to appointments. I remember meeting a client of hers. Most of the people she worked with were first-time home buyers, and I remember the joy that they had and what that experience meant for them. But then I remember meeting this one client. He was an investor, and he, buys different properties, and that opened up my world. And it's like, what is that? What is he doing? And I remember telling my mom, I want to be on that side of things. I want to be an investor. But my worldview was limited. That's all I knew. Until I got to college and learned about all these other ways of investing. But my for me, it was always about I wanted to be able to give back to my parents and give them a better life, and then eventually have my own family and have my kids set up, and then grandkids and all of that. And I think it's just the same human sentiment we all have, which is we all want to have stability, we all want to have comfort, and we all want to provide for our loved ones. And it's something that I relate to very well, and it's something that it gives me great joy to be able to work with people and provide.
What a wonderful story. You know, um, good values, solid foundation propels people for sure.
Mhm.
So tell me about college. What did you major in?
Okay, so college, I went to New York University, and I actually double majored. And I had double majored in sociology, which is the best way I can explain it is to study about thinking outside the box, right? And understanding how the world works. Very interdisciplinary. Um, then I also studied Latin American studies, another interdisciplinary. So you got to understand politics, economics, art, culture. I mean, how everything really comes together and intertwined. But I was actually setting out to go to law school, and I had a change of heart because around the time I had started college was the tech bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much just got immersed in understanding everything to do with that. And I remember at 19 years old, I was already opening up my retirement accounts and started investing. And I was already thinking, okay, how am I going to get to retirement? But as I mentioned before, it's my worldview of investing was only limited to real estate. When I got to college, it very much expanded because I started meeting some of my classmates that they were the beneficiaries of trust funds that their families had set up and generations worth of wealth building. And I just got hooked. And then from there on, that was my passion. So I was started teaching on my own until I graduated NYU, and then try to get into Wall Street.
Fantastic. And so your first job took you where?
Yeah. So my first job, so right after 9/11, anyone who remembers, not a great time to graduate in. But I was fortunate. I went with Claritas Nielsen, so I was working mostly in the financial services division.
Mm-hmm.
But I really understood the marketing side of things and how different companies service different client segments. So that was very fascinating.
Is that the Nielsen ratings that we're familiar with, same company?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yep.
Claritas was a subdivision of Nielsen.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing was, I'm working, so I'm supporting, your largest financial institutions, and the vice president walks by my desk and um, he sees a stock ticker going through my computer. He's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just, I'm following the markets." And then that's when it hit me. I'm like, "Okay, like." This is good. It's a good job. I've met amazing people. Some of them are still lifelong friends. Um, but this isn't exactly what I wanted. It's further away from where I want to be. And then from there, I went and got a job on Wall Street. I was on 44 Wall Street with a commodity shop. We were in currency and commodities, which was great because around that time, I think my third year in was the 2008 crash. So if anyone that remembers the housing bubble and
Yeah.
then the crash that came right after, I was down on Wall Street at the heart of that. So I don't take for granted, 150-year-old firms that we would consider to be established and, to be gone the very next day. I witnessed that. I was right there at the heart of it.
Young advisors, some of them would find that hard to understand if they came into
Yeah,
the business after that period of time.
yeah. So the value of being prudent and taking off risk whenever possible, it is
Yeah.
something I take very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because and I think you have a great story as well, just doing the tech bubble.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm sure you can share, like many other experiences. But I think most people, you only think about when it's going up, and you don't think about when it comes down, and you may not be sufficiently prepared for that.
Well, you mentioned that story, and I think I'll just talk about it for a moment because there's a
Hmm.
lesson there that I think is very valuable.
Hmm.
In 1999, I was invited to meet a lady in Brooklyn. Excuse me, or was it was in Brooklyn, yeah. And
Okay.
an annuity agent from New York City asked me to come and chat with her. Said she had a lot of money and in stocks, and he thought it probably would be prudent for her to reposition some of that into a safe vehicle like a fixed annuity.
Hmm.
So I recall going into that house, a very modest house, modest neighborhood, modest looking lady, and she handed me a piece of gray paper, and on it were 5 companies and a dollar value next to each one. And the companies were companies like Global Crossing and WorldCom and Corning and companies like that. There were 5, and the bottom line number threw me. Did not expect $424,780,000. And then she told me that her son, a medical doctor, had left the practice of medicine in order to become a day trader. And over the past year, he was making fantastic amounts of money. She was very proud of that,
Hmm.
much more money than he would have ever made as a physician. And I tried really hard that day to try to inject some rationality into her thinking and explain to her that she was not diversified. And she said to me, "Well, I am diversified. I have 5 companies." I said, No. I mean, you're not diversified. They're all the same type of companies. They're all, internet companies that have enjoyed
Hmm.
tremendous gains in recent years. When I say diversity, I mean different types of companies, different types of asset classes, some
Hmm.
bonds, some annuities, some CDs, safety. I could not persuade her, could not
Hmm.
persuade her. And in less than a year, the value of those holdings, $24.78 million, were less than $50,000 because 4 of the 5 companies went out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I don't know if she held on to the very end or not. She may have. The point is, people can get irrational when things seem like they're only
Mm-hmm.
going up, 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 up. And I think one of the jobs we have as financial advisors is to make people understand that there has to be kind of a framework of logic applied to their thinking when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
money, and try to,
Mm-hmm.
shut out the emotionalism,
Mm-hmm.
especially retirees. And I know you would agree with that, Michelle.
Oh,
So,
wholeheartedly.
all right. So back to your more important story. It's 2008. You're living through that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens after that?
Yeah. So for me, one of the biggest lesson was it's so I was more on the commodity side of things, so we were doing great. Commodities, currencies were doing fantastic.
Yeah.
But again, the value of diversification across assets, right? So shortly after that, moved down, relocated to the DC area for personal reasons, and I was very fortunate to land with one of the biggest asset management firms in the country, managing. It's a $52 billion firm. And I ended up working with one of the very best in the industry. So for me, then I switched from commodities currency side to the exchange traded fund side, more the asset management side of things. And for me, that was a boot camp. I spent about 11 years there, a little over 11 years. For me, that was a boot camp in products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could say my path has been, you know, um, not non-typical, right? Not the
Mm-hmm.
typical of, you get out of
Not at
college
all.
and no, like you get into a shop and you're taught to sell something. I don't sell anything. I've honestly, I've spent the last 15 years really just, and especially in the asset management side, working closely with individual clients and also their advisors in solving problems and helping them figure out, oh, you're trying to do X. Well, this is the type of product you're looking for. This is how it works. And I've been surprised to see, not every advisor has that product training, like they don't get in the deep end, right? And understand what's under the hood for you to know, okay, well, this is expected to perform a certain way in this type of market. So without the understanding, how can you properly diversify and mitigate risk
Yeah.
with what you have? So, yeah, it was a great experience. I've got some lifelong friends there, and I ended up managing the client-facing team, and I got my Series 24, which is for most people that don't know, that's the General Security Supervisory Principle. So it's typically that's what you would need to sort of supervise, make sure people are doing right by.
Right. Oh, your sound cut out there. Can you hear me, Michelle? Your sound cut out. Maybe your battery died. Okay, so live TV. This is what happens sometimes. Can you hear me, Michelle?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, so that good. You're back.
Yeah. So.
Those things happen sometimes. No worries. Okay, so that Series 24, you
Mhm,
know, general securities principle, supervisory license, you were
mhm,
supervising a team of
mhm,
individuals. They were facing
mhm.
clients, correct?
Correct, and myself as well. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
hands in there. So working with pretty much all your top advisors, it's more being a go-to for the advisors and the clients.
Yeah.
Really just solving problems. So it, I had to have a very broad level of understanding on many, many different things. I mean, we're talking about taxation and a Schedule K1, and you'd be surprised a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people don't even understand certain products, kick that off, and then you get that and don't know what that means.
Sure.
Um, but for me, it, so interesting enough, while working in asset management, we hit the, um, COVID. And people may not remember, but at the very beginning of COVID, towards the end of March, we had a particular week in the market where, there was something with the oil market, and then, that did, certain things to the volatility spike.
Yeah.
And I just remember And I'll never forget this. Just like the same way you don't forget that lady, I'll never forget this single mom. It's she ended up calling, I think, our firm because she didn't have anyone else to call, and uh, it gets passed on to me for me to talk to her. And this was a lady who I think, like, honestly, like most people, you're just trying to do their very best. Worked hard. She had money she'd been saving for her 3 kids' college fund. She got a kid going to college. I remember that September, and with the other two not too far behind. And she explains to me, well, I asked her, how did you learn about these certain products? She explains to me she had someone in a online chat room had told her this particular product is a sure thing. And so she went ahead and put all of her kids' college fund in that. And about a year later, so now we're talking now, fast forward March, beginning of the pandemic, in a matter of 2 days, she's lost 90% of her kids' college fund. And mind you, they're about to go to college. So as you can imagine, I think like any parent, she's on the ledge. And so financially, there's nothing we can do. So I was just trying to walk off the ledge and really just educate and help her understand what happened, because can't even get your mind around what this particular product is and how it worked in that specific market scenario. And I just remember getting off the phone and I was just thinking, my heart just went out to her. I'm a mom, and I can only imagine the frustration she's feeling. And I remember thinking, I got into this industry because I wanted to help people like my parents. I wanted to learn as much as I could and then go and help people that are hardworking, that really just want to do better for themselves and for their family. And I wanted to be someone that can guide them. And that precise moment, I just thought, we're doing something wrong when this woman felt her best source of information is some random person in an online chat room that knows nothing about her needs, her goals, her situation, is not a fiduciary. Um, and just and at the moment as well, I didn't have someone myself that I can point someone to. So had she asked me, I didn't have someone. And I said to myself, you know what? I've been helping people for the last 15 years, but they can't get me directly, right? And I can't save the next person like her unless I actually step outside of corporate and go go in the front lines. And that's when I made the decision, you know what? This is what I had set out to do in the first place 15, 20 something years ago. It's time. So from there, that was very
That's a courageous
impetus.
decision at that
Yeah,
point.
very
Really
much.
courageous and really for a noble purpose.
Yeah.
For a noble purpose. So how do you begin? You decide one day, I'm leaving this, safe, sheltered world, regular
Mhm.
paycheck,
Mhm.
financial security,
Mhm.
know what it's about,
Mhm.
happy to an extent. Now one day you transition
Mhm.
to risk. You go on your
Yeah.
own, you become an entrepreneur, you're taking a
Yeah.
risk.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, I'm very strategic, so I planned the idea, but then I put the wheels in motion for a year. So that's where the
I'm not
strategic mind comes into
surprised.
place. So make sure your ducks are in a row. But I say, you know what? I say that's, I think, it's all heart. I mean, that you may put the strategy that's, you do it intelligently. Uh, But it's the heart that drives you, right? Because for me, look, this isn't a job, it's not a career. For me, it's a calling. Because if I can help, just one or two or three more women like her to avoid a situation like that, I would feel I've made an impact. And at the end of the day, that's what I want to do. I want to make an impact. I want to live a purposeful life. And I think like so many people as well during the pandemic, you were questioning, am I living the purposeful life that I want? Is this in alignment with who I am and the legacy I want to leave behind? So for me, it very much is a calling because it's I'll tell you, my mom calls me, depending, I feel like it's every 2 weeks when that the lotto is at, X level. And she's like, Michelle, you got to play. I'm like, here's my numbers. Can you just do it for me? And I always tell her, but I would still do this. The location
Yeah.
would change,
Yeah.
I'd be in different like exotic places around the world. But for me, this is a calling. So when I say it's hard, I think, and similar to other entrepreneurs, you feel like, why not? You know, why not pursue your purpose? Why not pursue? And then, worst case scenario, I'd say for me, regret is the thing I don't want to have. So I'd rather try it. And if I can make an impact, great. And if not, I mean, you can always go back to corporate. But um, I found in the last 2 years, it's been so fulfilling.
Mm.
And like I say, my trajectory has been non-typical. Most people, they work in the sales role for a long time, and you build a book of business, you build a client base. So I've very much been starting from scratch. But I have found so much joy already. I've taken several people that they were hoping to retire. They thought they could retire a certain age, and I've shown them a path where they could retire. I think had shaved in like 5-7 years off. That's not everyone's case, but just seeing the joy
Yeah.
that makes an impact for me, um, and just helping them understand how all these different things are interconnected, right? Because I'm more of a big picture person, so I love looking at things holistically, not just within one silo, not just investment, but let's look at everything. How are your taxes impacted? How are your other goals impacted? So just very much looking at everything, all as
Let
one
me ask you a
beautiful
question.
puzzle.
I bet people are wondering who are listening
Hmm.
to you. You made this transition,
Hmm.
no clients.
Hmm.
How did you find your clients?
One by one. It's one by one. It's been reaching out to people that I think would be good clients, and just beginning to deliver value and impact one by one.
And
I'd say LinkedIn has been great as well.
mhm.
I've never been a social media person, so I don't know how to navigate those things. Um, but no, it honestly is just connecting one by one, and value, giving
Yeah,
value.
yeah. So I want to talk to you a little bit about women.
Hmm.
I'm steadfastly defending women's retirement security as best I can all the time.
Hmm.
I've had 3 articles published about it in the last week or so. I was touched reading a comment from Cheryl Moore last night, about
Hmm.
midnight, talking about an experience of dealing with financial people, men,
Hmm.
that made her feel disregarded
Hmm.
and slighted, I guess you'd say. And, that's really very prominent in the research, the gender stereotyping that men are too often guilty of and need to get their arms around and stop doing. I don't think in 99% of the cases it's intentional. I think it's cultural and it has to change. But tell me about your own experience. You have accumulated a lot of financial savvy working
Hmm.
inside big asset management firms. Were
Hmm.
you ever in that position, in spite of all you know, that you're kind of misregarded by males?
Um, yes. I'd say it's not just males though. But yes, in a different sense. I've felt it, let's say professionally. And I think like many other women professionally, we've had at least, one or two situations where you present, you present a great idea, and it's completely disregarded until your male peer goes and presents that exact idea. It's like, oh, it's brilliant. All of a sudden, it's brilliant. And the few women in the room were looking at each other like, really, did this just happen? So I definitely would encounter things like that. I mean, at the same time, I've had some amazing male um, partners and coworkers that were great supporters and advocates for me. So there are those. But I've seen how the industry, I think, like you say, isn't aligning with women or isn't impacting or speaking to women. And I've seen it, and I want to change that. I want to change that because I hear you. I hear you. I see you. Something I've noticed, and I think the male advisors that I've worked with, I would find them focused very, very much on performance, investment performance, investment performance. And the question I would always have was, what was the goal? What's the plan? What are we working for? And maybe it's just my own view. For me, money is not the objective. Money is just the instrument. It's the life. It's the life you want to have. It's the life you want to create. It's the memories. For me, I love traveling and I love experiences with my little one. That's what I want to create. So we're working for, are we putting the money to use for what we want? And I find most people want flexibility in time. They want flexibility in space. Being able to be where they want to be. They want just the flexibility to maybe obtain the things they want to get. So I wouldn't hear advisors having those types of conversations. So I think I've found, and especially because more about like 70% of my clients so far have been women, that is what they want. What they want to make sure is that the money is actually working to what's the specific thing that they want, and are we in alignment with that?
Yeah, I think about it
And
as goals. Women have
exactly.
goals, and they want their goals understood.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're not understood, there's a misalignment, and it
Mm-hmm.
usually results in the termination of the advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was always reminded male advisors that, and this is the good part of the story,
Mm-hmm.
women are delighted to work with a male,
Mm-hmm.
assuming there's a genuine, authentic relationship and a willingness to listen and understand their goals and not
Yeah.
try to push on them their view of what's
Mm-hmm.
important about money.
Mm-hmm. Or I'd say assume that they can't comprehend, because I think women, there's a bit of a mindset, a money mindset thing where maybe culturally we've been told for a long time, oh no, this is above you, this is going over your head. So I think some women, not all, but some women, we may have taken that, bought into that story. And I
Mm-hmm.
like to remind them, I'm like, okay, you are running a very successful business, or you're running a high level executive role. You're managing a household, you're managing a marriage in many situations, you're managing multiple things, you're caring for your parents, you're managing multiple things. What makes you think you cannot comprehend this one thing? You can. So let's talk about it. And I'm not going to use big industry terms to scare you off. Like, I'm going to speak to you in like a girlfriend in a way that you understand. And for everyone as well, just it's based, communicate in a way that people understand. And you could understand it.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is knowing that they do make decisions, so assuming that the guy is the one who makes the decisions. I will tell you, most women I know are the ones making the most of the financial decisions in the household, or at least the driving force. Like, okay, we need to move and get a new house, or we need to get ready for the college fund, or we need to go and take this vacation, or we need, I find it's the women who's the driving force. So to think that they're not an active player, not an active member in the decisions in the household, I think doesn't bode well.
I totally agree with all of that, and I'm sort of optimistic that I think men over time will get it. If they don't, there's no future for them.
Yeah.
If you can't relate to the person who
Yeah.
controls the money, you can't
Yeah.
have a relationship with the person who controls the money.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let me ask you a couple of other questions here.
Mm-hmm.
And these are sort of off topic
Okay.
from our basic conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
if I could, give you a magic wand,
Mm-hmm.
and then you could wave that wand,
Mm-hmm.
and you could make any single change in the world of money, and you could do it instantly, what change would you make?
That's a great question. Well, two things. I would take away risk, because that is the number one thing I'm looking at. It's the risk of you losing money. That's the purpose for diversity, that diversification. That's the purpose for, different instruments that we're looking at. If I can take away risk, and so people could not lose money.
You're not saying avoid risky assets. You're saying do it in the right way. Am I correct?
Oh no, I have a magic wand, so I can do whatever I want.
Okay.
No, I'm saying
That's true.
all that there is. They cannot lose money, regardless of asset. No matter which asset, they cannot lose money. That would be a magic wand. So if they wanted to get into the S&P 500, let's say the S&P 500 every year goes up 10%.
Well, financial heaven,
wand.
right? I did say the magic wand. Yes,
but the second thing I would take away would be taxes, because a lot of the stuff I do active tax planning throughout the year, and the decisions I make are very much looking at taxes as well, tax implication. So if we could do away with taxes, I would be very happy with that too.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Second question.
Mm-hmm.
If you were not a financial advisor,
Mm-hmm.
but instead could have another job or profession,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be anything in the world, astronaut, great singer, athlete,
Mm-hmm.
botanist, whatever it would be.
Okay.
What would you be?
Okay. Well, I would tell you what I would not be. No one wants to hear me sing. But no, honestly, this is my calling. This isn't a job. This isn't a career. This is a calling for me. So I would be doing exactly what I'm doing. The locations would change again. I'd be doing this from the Mediterranean in the summer and the Caribbean during the winter. But this is my calling. What I will tell you, what I would do more of is I love philanthropy. I love giving, and I love making an impact on people. So if I had all the money in the world, honestly, I would be building domestic violence shelters. I'd be building clinics, like health clinics, and schools in areas that don't have that, areas that don't have clean water. I would be doing that kind of humanitarian work. So that's something I would do. I would still be helping people financially, because let's admit it, finances are key to so many people. And my parents and who've worked so hard, they're now retired, and I get so much joy watching them in retirement. The happiness, the peace they have. They're healthier actually as well. They have time for their health, and it's very fulfilling to me to watch them enjoy their retirement. And I just want to have other people have that same experience. And granted, I'm working with people that have $1 million, $2, $3 million, and you'd be surprised. No matter how much income or wealth they have, they still have the same concerns. Someone with $3 million has the same concern as someone with $500,000. Am I going to outlive my assets? Am I going to be able to transition from steady income to now turning this into a reliable income? Am I going to have enough to cover for health? Am I going to have enough to leave something behind? You'd be surprised. it's a lot of the same questions. We just have to adjust to the amount of money that they have to work with. But I think deep down, a lot of people want the same thing.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Third question.
Mhm.
Think about retirement and imagine it to be the most perfect, idyllic retirement anyone could ever have. Anywhere, doing anything. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's for me in particular. Um, yeah, I'd be in the Mediterranean in the winter. Sorry, in the summers. I love all things Italian, so I'd spend a lot of time in Italy. And the other places too, but good part in Italy. I'd have a house in Casa de Campo in Dominican Republic. Anyone who's a golfer, Teeth of the Dog, golf courses with the very best in the Caribbean. So I recommend that. And San Diego would be my home base, but no, I'm an active person. I love people. I love making an impact, and retirement for me would be basically just scaling down where maybe I'm working with 20 people only, but I'm still impacting people, and doing philanthropy work. More beach days for sure for me, and I love cultural activities, so museums and things like that. But for me, what I've been trying to do, honestly, is live the life I want to have as much as possible now and not wait, 20 years from now. And that was part of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, because this is, again, for me, this is a calling. So I don't see myself, for me, retirement is just sort of scaling down. But if someone calls me and they have, a problem or a question or something, like, I'm going to help. Like that's what fills me up. Helping people is what fills me up.
You're in the right job. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
Michelle, I have to tell you,
Okay.
you are an outstanding financial advisor with a very interesting story that you've told, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
It's been absolutely wonderful having you on the first podcast. I would tell any financial advisor watching, if you are an outstanding financial advisor and you have an interesting story to tell, email oadvisorpodcast@gmail.com. Tell me about your story, not just your professional story, but your personal story as well. And maybe we can get you featured on the podcast. Michelle, thanks so much. You were a great guest.
Thank you, David. It's been an honor.
You have a bright future.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We really appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Outstanding Advisor Podcast. If you would like to be featured on the podcast, tell us why you are an outstanding financial advisor with an interesting story to tell. Send an email to oadvisorpodcast@gmail.com. That's oadvisorpodcast@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.